Hi, I'm Nick Powell, City Hall Bureau Chief with City and State. Joining me today on City and State TV is Jamie Rubin, the Director of the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. Thanks for joining us today, Jamie.
Great to be here.
So I wanted to first ask you, I know the Storm Recovery Office does a lot of housing recovery work, but you also have been involved in strengthening coastal communities. And can you tell me a little bit about the programs that have kind of furthered those resiliency goals?
Sure. So we have one of the interesting things about the way we've done our work is that resiliency is a consistent theme throughout all of our programs, not just our coastal work, but also throughout housing. So for example, in the housing program, we are paying for people to elevate their homes if that's what they want to do. And of course, that's a critical part of protecting them from coastal storms. Other programs that we run that are specifically focused on resiliency away from housing are, we have the Community Reconstruction Program, which is this innovative community-driven resiliency development program that we can talk about later if you'd like, that we've devoted about $600 million to, $600 really plus million to. We have well over $1 billion that we're going to be spending on general infrastructure projects, and that's all about resilience. It's repairing broken infrastructure, building it back better. It's helping local governments and some of our fellow state agencies build back their assets and build back new ones. So that they're better prepared for the storm. And again, it's not all coastal, but it's mostly coastal given the nature of this particular storm.
And these are all funded through community block development grants?
That's correct. It's all federal money.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about the Community Reconstruction Program. I understand there was a competition of sorts that kind of, I guess, engage the local communities in having a real input in these projects? So
there were two parts to it. There was a competition that was associated that we sort of added on later, but the base of the program really came from the governor's intuition, which dates back to his time as HUD Secretary, where he ran the empowerment program, the Empowerment Zone program, which is kind of a similar thing. That the people who know most about their own communities are the people that live and work in their communities every day. And really right after the storm, right after Sandy, even I think before the Congress appropriated $50 billion for Sandy, he decided that there was going to be at least one program that we ran with a significant amount of money that was going to be modeled exactly along those lines. And so that was the Community Reconstruction Program. The way it's set up is we have, and you remember the state, our office operates not only some in New York City, but really primarily on Long Island, and then we have Irene and Lee responsibility as well. So we go all the way up north past Albany. We have 45 communities in the first round that we've identified that were damaged by Sandy, Irene, and Lee. Each of those communities has a committee drawn from the community of people who are sort of the local leaders, not elected officials, but the local civic leaders, people with long roots in the community. We allocated a certain amount of money to each of those communities, ranging from $3 to $25 million. We hired professional planners to come work with them and then gave them significant state resources. And for 9 months, they worked hard day and night for free. The communities did, day and night, to come up with these resilience plans. We had public engagement meetings. The public was very much involved. There were planning sessions, there were draft reports. It was a highly iterative process. And the result of this was the conference that we had a couple of weeks ago, April 23rd, in Albany, where the governor presided, the mayor was there, to present these plans. There were 400-page plans. They're all available on our website at stormrecovery.newyork.gov. And they detailed the communities, their priorities, the risk assessments that they did for their own assets, and then hundreds and hundreds of projects that we're going to help pay for as much as possible that they came up with that are very detailed. They're not just pie-in-the-sky projects to protect their communities from future storms. It's a remarkable, remarkable effort. The awards, the competition came in once we had set up the program. We had 8 awards that we announced again at the conference for things like use of technology in the plan, best efforts to engage the public, things like this. $3 million per award, and we gave those out to 8 additional communities, 8 of those communities.
And can you highlight a couple of specific plans and what the details of those are? I understand, for instance, I don't know if this was part of that competition, but Breezy Point has a dune barrier system that they've proposed to strengthen the resiliency of that community?
Sure.
Is that part of that?
That's actually comes from a separate,
okay.
A separate activity that we run called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program.
Okay.
It's an entirely separate thing. It's a very exciting project, and it's interesting you raise that because the Breezy Point community that worked in our Community Reconstruction Program was very involved also in helping design the Double Dune project that we're funding elsewhere. Okay. So some of the proposals they came up with through our project very much are complementary to the Double Dune. So it's a perfect mix. And the Double Dune thing is about $50 million that we're going to pay for. Their allocation through this program is much smaller, but it's leveraging federal dollars. There's some fascinating programs of the projects that came out. So, for example, Sydney in upstate New York in Delaware County is a community that was hit really, really hard by hurricane, I think it was Irene. They came up with a great proposal to take about 70 homes that are right on the Delaware River, where that's a very vulnerable population. A lot of particularly elderly folks live there, and they're right on the banks of the river. They're constantly getting flooded. We're going to buy out, through this proposal, we're going to buy out, or this town of Sydney is going to buy out all of their homes, knock them down to the ground, turn them into a wetland that will protect. Wetlands are great protective barriers, so protect from future storms on the banks. At the same time, they're going to buy about 100-acre property that came up for sale at a higher elevation elsewhere inside the town, so keep everybody there. They found some developers who were interested in developing housing, affordable housing, and other housing on that plot. So you can hopefully move the folks whose houses we bought into the new development. And what you end up with is, and then there's excess acreage in that property that's going to be turned into other natural environmental development. So you're going to end up with a much stronger Sydney, better protected from the storm, folks living in much better housing, and continues to be affordable to keep people in the town, which is one of the big issues in our communities upstate, people leaving. Right. And this is hopefully will help solve that. So that's just one of hundreds of really exciting programs.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So moving to the housing side, tell me a little bit about the Sandy buyback program, and I guess also the enhanced buyout program. Are those two mutually exclusive? Are they connected in some way? Can you tell me a little bit about those?
So we run. It's a great question. We run two separate. What we call buyout programs. There's the enhanced buyout areas, and then there's what we call sort of generically the acquisitions. The enhanced buyout areas are, it's a program where we have worked with the local community to figure out whether there is a group of homes in a dense area where there's consensus among everybody in the community, whether it's a 50-home community or a 150-home community, that they've had enough. For whatever reason, they think the risk is too great in their area, and they want to sell all their homes at once to us. Under the rules of that program, we can offer them a little bit more money. It's pre-storm value plus a little bit of an incentive bonus. And once we've bought their homes, we demolish them, take them down to the ground, and it remains natural forever. So it's a wetland or it's a environmental project, whatever it is, but it's not redeveloped. That's the buyout area, and that's what we've done, I think, with great success on Staten Island primarily. You've probably seen this. We're proposing to buy out 3 communities on Staten Island: Oakwood Beach, which was the first, where we've closed about 100 homes already. Ocean Breeze and Grand Beach, which is right near Ocean Breeze, sort of the two parts of the same issue. And by the time we're done, we'll probably have bought out, I don't know, 300-400 homes, added significantly to the Staten Island, Staten Island's protective areas. We've also applied to the U.S. Department of Agriculture for another grant to buy out about 70 homes in a nearby area, which we take them down, again, we buy them out, take them down to the ground, and add them into the Staten Island Blue Belt. So there's more protection there. The acquisition program, we're also doing this out in Suffolk County. The acquisition program is more of a one-off, people who, for whatever reason, don't want to stick around, they want to sell their homes. There's no incentive payment, it's pre-storm value. The state will buy them, or we're working with the city to buy homes inside the city that the city doesn't want to buy, but we will do for them. And eventually they can be redeveloped, resold and redeveloped.
Now, I wanted to ask you more of a kind of a big picture question. So the office obviously is dealing with impacted communities from 3 different storms, right? Irene, Lee, and Sandy.
Correct.
Irene and Lee affected more upstate communities, whereas Sandy was obviously more coastal and downstate in Long Island. Are there unique challenges to the environments where these storms affected? I mean, like compare downstate, upstate, ocean front to riverfront. Can you kind of go through some of the challenges, or is it kind of pretty much straightforward?
No, it was nothing straightforward about this. That's one of the things we figured out very quickly. It's not only the geographic differences, but there's demographic differences. I mean, everything about it is different from community to community. And in particular, working in New York City is one thing, but working on Long Island and upstate, where the effect of the home rule tradition here in the state is particularly strong. You're working with literally hundreds and hundreds of local governments, each of which has their own special their own special set of rules to work with and their own leadership. So it's really it's fascinating, but it can be a bit of a challenge. It's a great question. I would say in terms of, let's just keeping it simple, Sandy versus Irene and Lee, you're exactly right. Most of Irene and Lee was upstate. Those are much more rural communities. Obviously, density is much lower. It tends to be riverine flooding that we were faced with, some wind and then a lot of river. And river problems are really are interesting. I'm getting an education in this as I go along. One of the things about rivers is that you can't really tell what the problem is just by looking at the spot of the flooding. You have to go, sometimes 15 miles upstream to figure out where the origin of a particular flooding issue is. There may be a dam that's creating a problem that only emerges 15 miles later, or there's a bridge that isn't wide enough, at its opening, and or it's clogged from years of lack of maintenance. And so whenever there's a flood, it creates a choke point, and all of a sudden you've got adverse consequences that you can't really predict just by looking at where the water actually came out. So you have to do some really complex hydrological modeling and other things that I have absolutely no expertise in, and it takes a lot of work. The good news is we have some real expertise in the state government at DEC and other places, and we've been able to dig into a lot of this, but it's very, very complicated. Coastal flooding has its own set of complications, but it does tend to be, on Long Island, it's somewhat more straightforward. It's the ocean or the bay, and you can pretty much see what the issue is. It's the water comes in, and maybe there's there's a breach in a barrier island or something that's creating a bit of a problem, and then once the water gets inland, you've got separate issues, you've got stormwater issues and whatever. But basically, you sort of know what you have to protect against. The problem there is it's very expensive to build a protection that is going to mean anything. I mean, you build a seawall or oyster reefs, or there's all kinds of options, but it's very, very expensive stuff. The riverine protections upstate can be much more economical, but they're complicated to get to. And there's environmental concerns that are common to both areas.
Sure. Now, talking about coordinating with local governments and also with the federal government, I know that's something that on the city side, the Build It Back program has had a lot of trouble with cutting through that red tape. So how have you kind of navigated those challenges on the state level in getting everybody on the same page and getting money out to people and getting homes rebuilt?
So I'm sympathetic to the problems that others may have in navigating, local and federal government issues. Certainly, there's a huge amount of money that's coming in for the storm, and you can't minimize the amount of bureaucracy. That said, I think we've taken the right approach to it, which is, first of all, we hired people who really knew what they were doing right off the bat. Whether you think I'm one of those or not, I did come from HUD for 9 months before I came here, and I was pretty familiar with the Sandy projects. And we've found as much outside expertise as we possibly can from other storms where the rules are basically the same. So I think we loaded ourselves up well right from day one. We made some philosophical decisions pretty quickly about how we were going to go about this. We decided on the housing program, the most important thing was to get people back in their homes. And we weren't going to, at some level, we just weren't going to take no for an answer. We worked very closely with HUD. We have a great relationship with HUD. We talk to them every single day and sought their advice wherever possible as to how to work within the rules, but how to expedite things. And they're perfectly willing to help you figure out how to do it. So, for example, traditionally the traditional approach in some places has been for the housing program for the state to find contractors and then give them a choice, give people a choice of a certain number of contractors to work with. We'll line up the contractors. You pick which one of two you want, and we'll pay those contractors in advance, and then they'll do the work. We said, look, the people who know contractors are the homeowners themselves. They're perfectly capable of making their own decisions. The issue isn't whether they can find contractors. Let them find contractors. A lot of people already found contractors. The issue we're going to have is getting money in their hands so they can pay the contractor to do the work, because it's the rare contractor that's going to do it just on faith, right? So we helped HUD understand that that was the approach we were going to take. They were perfectly fine with it, and they let us get money out quicker than ordinarily you would. So they didn't make us go through all the hoops of figuring out whether people had actually done work, was the contractor they were going to work with an acceptable contractor. We said, look, this is an insurance program. Let people figure it out, and we'll make sure that the rules are being followed.
Jamie Rubin, the Director of the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Nick.